Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen to my presentation. I want to sort of set a rough agenda. I have some slides prepared, and I hope we can cover the slides in about 20 minutes, and then I want to leave the remaining time for any questions. So please hold your questions and applause until after the slides are done. Yeah, and let's get started. So a quick introduction. My name's Sean. I'm an engineer on the marketing engineering team. I'm from the United States. I've been messing around with websites and computers for quite a long time, but I've been doing it professionally for about 10 years now. And most of my focus in a paid context is on backend technology, server-side scripting, specifically Ruby, most recently. I love music. Here's a picture of me and 50 Cent, of course. And yeah, I also have a cat named Mommy. So there's a picture of my cat. So in the next, 20 minutes, I want to cover a few topics. I'm going to tell you about a side project that I built that revolves around synthesizers. And if synthesizers aren't the most exciting topic for you, no problem. I'm going to spend the second part of the talk talking about, general lessons and takeaways that hopefully you can find value in, and I'll use sort of my side project for examples. And then, of course, at the end, there will probably be a bidding war for all the huge, fantastic, groundbreaking ideas that I'm going to tell you guys about. So yeah, stick around for that too. So, part one, about my project. We need a little bit of background information first. For those of you who are not musical, that's fine. As a matter of fact, that's probably even better. So a synthesizer, in case you didn't know, is a musical instrument that generates sound using electrical current. So think of a traditional instrument like a guitar, makes sound when you pluck the string, and the string vibrates, and then we hear it. Or a drum, you hit the top of a drum, and it vibrates, and we hear it. So synthesizers are different because there's no physical thing that's vibrating. It's an electrical current that's oscillating. And when we take that electrical current and hook it up to an amplifier and a loudspeaker, we can hear basically an electronic waveform. So here's an example. I have a synthesizer right here in front of me. A very plain, sort of ugly sound. We can also do square wave. They have slightly different characters. But what really sets synthesizers apart is the amount of control you're given over shaping the sound. So as you can see in this picture, there's a lot of knobs and controls and stuff. And that helps us change the timbre of what the instrument does. So the timbre is how we can tell a guitar is different from a piano, is different from a trumpet when we hear it, even though they're playing the same note on the musical staff. But the fun part about all this control you get over the nature of the sound is the wide range of expression. You can make happy sounds, soothing sounds, harsh, noisy sounds, annoying sounds, of course, robotic sounds, or really wild and unhinged sounds. The possibilities are almost endless, and it is quite enthralling, I must say. You can spend hours and hours just turning the knobs and exploring what happens. And specific to this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a synthesizer called the Korg Volca bass. So this is a relatively cheap synthesizer that came out in 2013. It costs about 100 euros, 120 euros. I picked one up right after it came out, and it has sat on my desk, and I would just mess around with it when I'm waiting for my code to compile or my test to run. And I sort of became obsessed with it, which I think you'll see. And yeah, maybe I could do a short demo. There's knobs on the front that control the filter, which is how muffled or clear the sound is. And there are controls for the envelope, which is how the sound behaves over time. The resonance, which sort of makes the filter more harsh. And then you can control the octave, which note you play. just for a very basic introduction to what this machine does. So one limitation that a lot of synthesizers have is that they cannot save and recall their settings. So if I spend hours moving these knobs, exploring all the sounds I can make, how do I get back to it? Let's say I'm in a band and I need a certain sound for a certain song or something. A lot of machines can't do this. Some of them can, many cannot. So the old-fashioned solution was to just write down where the positions of the knobs are. As you can see, this very accurate depiction of a wizard is probably doing exactly that. Yeah, and that's called a patch sheet. So a setting or a preset for a synthesizer is called a patch. Yeah, and that's sort of slow and boring, and it's a bummer, I think. Something else we need to know about for context is something called MIDI. Now, MIDI is how computers can communicate with synthesizers and how synthesizers can communicate with one another. For example, I could say, from a computer, I could say, hey, synthesizer, please play this note. Okay, now stop playing that note. That's an example of a MIDI signal. Another very important thing that MIDI can do is send control changes, meaning I can say, hey, synthesizer, change the setting that affects your timbre. So change this, virtually where this knob is pointed at. And so I can shape the sound remotely using MIDI. Now, that technology came out in 1980. It wasn't until 35 years later, in 2015, that support for major browsers was released so that I can send MIDI from my browser to a synthesizer. And actually, the first one to do that was Google Chrome. So that's called WebMIDI, and I'm going to make use of that in this project I'm about to show you. Okay, so that wraps up the background. Now, what is my project? I built something, I launched it in December 2016, and it's called VolcaShare.com. And what it is I hope you're sitting down. What it is an online patch database for this Volca synthesizer that uses WebMIDI to help synchronize other people's user-submitted patches directly to your physical instrument. So let's take a look. Here you can see the home page. As a user, I'm the proud owner of one of these synthesizers, and I want to know what kind of sounds I can make with it. So I can navigate to the list of sounds, and maybe this one catches my fancy, and I can see where the knobs are turned to, and I can recreate that on my synthesizer manually. Or I can use WebMIDI to do most of that work for me. Now, I did have a slight technical difficulty last night when I updated my computer. The driver for my MIDI interface went out of date, when unsupported. So I'm going to fall back to a video demonstration that I recorded this morning with one of my older machines. But this is how you would use the WebMIDI functionality. Here I have a patch on VolcaShare.com loaded up in my browser, my Korg Volca bass, and a USB MIDI interface, which is connected to the synthesizer by this blue-green cable. So right now I have sort of an obnoxious sound coming out of the synthesizer, just so we can tell the difference after it changes. So the next step is I'll plug in my USB MIDI interface. Wait till the light comes on. There we go. Now, when I reload VolcaShare in the browser, I'll see this new section at the top. So this enables me to configure what MIDI output I have, and when I click this button, the sound coming out of my synthesizer will change. And keep in mind, not all of the parameters are MIDI compatible, so I do still need to do a little bit of tweaking manually, but a lot of the work has been taken out of the process for us. And let's just try one more. How about this bass sound? So before, after. And that's how the WebMIDI feature works with volcashare.com. All right. So I hope that was useful at sort of illustrating what the sort of valuable use case of this application is. And like I mentioned, I want to move next into some more generalized sort of takeaways I have from this as a developer. Sorry, let me go to the next slide. Thanks, me. Yeah, here's a look under the hood for all the geeks like me. It runs on Rails. It uses MongoDB as a database, and of course the core web technologies are there. I also use jQuery for just to make some interface things easier, and Bootstrap, which is a set of sort of built-in styles and functions for interfaces as well. And the whole thing is hosted on Heroku. So one of the things I needed to decide at the very beginning was, what tech stack do I want to build this on? And I could sit here and say, well, you know, all of my formal education, we used relational databases, and we wrote SQL to join tables. And I wanted to get away from that. So that's why I chose Mongo. And while that is that I wanted to get better at Mongo, the simple fact is there was quite a large overlap with what I was doing at my job at the time. So like I said, I was a backend developer. I was working a lot with Rails and Mongo. I had a degree of familiarity, and I wanted to get better at that stuff. And I also sort of wanted to prove to myself that I still had front-end chops, because I consider myself sort of full stack, sort of capable, but I haven't done that in a professional capacity for several years. So I wanted to stay sharp on that stuff. And I also wanted the challenges of the tool set to sort of take a back seat to the challenges of the product. So my real drive when I was making this was to focus on the product and hopefully make the challenges of the tool set minimal. So part number 2. Where are we on time, by the way? We're looking okay. Why is it good to have a side project? So the first and most obvious point is I can use it as a guinea pig. It's a low-risk environment where I can experiment with stuff, and then later I can turn around and sort of apply the knowledge to something I can do at work. On the right-hand side, you can see I performed a Rails upgrade on Volca Share, and I happened to need to do the same exact thing down to the minor patch version the next day at work. So I just did this one evening, and I wrote my notes in the commit message, and then the next day when I had to do it, along with the Rails upgrade guide, it was actually really no headaches. So I was thanking myself that day. And this is just one example. There's you can try out new gems or new tools or new design approaches, and bring that knowledge with you back, onto other projects. Something that I think is really important, and I think we've all heard this notion of, oh, there's so much you don't learn at university that you'll learn after a few months on the job. And I believe that's true. And I also want to take that a step further and say, I think there's so much that you don't learn in a paid context that you will learn in when you're approaching problems on your own terms. And for me, the side project was what enabled me to do that extra sort of growing. When you join, as a developer, when you join a project in progress, there's a lot of the beginning phase stuff that you don't do, setting up configurations, making early design choices and tool set choices, visiting the docs on a need-to-know basis rather than reading them from the beginning. And when you make a project from scratch, a lot of that becomes a lot clearer when you go back to work in the sort of project in progress. And next, the point on the bottom half of the screen, the fact of the matter is a lot of development work can be relatively prescriptive. You're fulfilling the needs of perhaps a product owner or some other stakeholder, and you don't have a ton of autonomy regarding what you're building. Or maybe you have this cool idea, but you need to hit a quarterly goal, so there's a time constraint there and you can't. Or maybe you are interested in something that has basically no overlap with what you're building at work. For example, synthesizers. And there's things outside the responsibilities of your role that you might it might be awkward if you step in and try to do them at work because, we need to know who's handling what in order to work harmoniously to a certain extent. So to that point, even though I was working on this project all by myself, I'm the only person in the Git history, I do believe that by handling a lot of these responsibilities that would be done by my colleagues, I feel like I've become a better team member because I sort of put myself in their shoes and try to address the challenges that these other roles face. For example, visual designer. I have no training whatsoever in visual design. I think the slideshow might be evidence of this. So on the left-hand side, we see someone else's solution that predates Volca Share, actually, and they just have a bunch of HTML sliders. And I thought, oh, that's ugly. I can do something better than that. And so on the right-hand side, we see Volca Share, which has a one-to-one sort of design layout with the actual machine. So there's nothing to be lost in translation. That was just one choice, one very important choice that I feel I had to make. And next is I did have to put on my front-end developer hat and solve a lot of problems there too. I can show you an example. So if I go to the main patch page, what we see here, I can adjust these parameters with my mouse and the knobs rotate like they would on the actual machine. What we're looking at is just an HTML form with a fancy coat of paint. If I unhide some of these controls down here, we can see, we can see that they're just HTML sliders. And when I move these knobs, the corresponding form element, which is usually invisible, is changed. So that was, this is really the most meaty part of the application, and it's something I had to figure out as a backend developer who vaguely knows front-end stuff. Another big feature of this site is it's responsive. So the same web page is served no matter if you're looking on a cell phone or a tablet, and the elements on the screen arrange themselves so that it doesn't become overwhelming. And this has been the standard for about 10 years now, I believe, responsive web design. Next, and I think the most important possibly, is I had to sort of act as my own product owner. And one of the important things that product owners need to figure out is how do I get the value to, how do I guide users towards the goals of the application? Now, this platform isn't monetized, so the goal would usually be, we want them to buy something or to book an ad with HeyJobs or something. That would be a goal. The goal here is for the users to engage with the content and hopefully create an account and make content. One of the big challenges right off the bat was if I look at this, the positions of the knobs mean basically nothing to me. The subjective quality of the sound that results from this is not apparent at all. And that's a problem when you're trying to make users engage with something that they can't see or feel or judge. It's not good product design. So the solution here was I enabled people to provide audio samples. So there's no guesswork by looking at the thing. We can just click their audio sample and hear what that person recorded to show their synth patch. So this person happened to have uploaded like their song or whatever. Additionally, I brought the audio sample functionality forward another step so that you can listen to audio samples from the index page, so you don't need to drill down. You don't need to drill down and less user action to get to the valuable part. In addition to that, because all of these patches are user-submitted content, I only have so much control over the quality. So I created a ranking algorithm that scores patches with audio samples higher, and of course that decays over time. Older patches get deranked. That's based off of supposedly what the old Reddit like hotness algorithm was. Reddit, algorithm. And last, not last, but coming up on last, when I initially launched this, it was just for a Korg Volca-based synthesizer. And the fact is that the Korg Volca base is one of several of these small synthesizers. And as I lurked on the internet, on Reddit and Facebook and stuff, I noticed that the Volca keys seem to be pretty popular. So I think at the right before the pandemic, I decided I'm going to buy one of these Volca keys, and then I'm going to make the website double its functionality, and people can save Volca keys stuff too. And you can see here at the graph at the bottom, as soon as I launched support for that in February of 2020, the traffic sort of doubled, actually more than doubled, sort of consistently over time. So you got to give users what they want. That's a product owner decision as well. Another graph, if we look at the number of patches people made, you can see a clear change in trajectory there. Pro tip, if you ever need to make a persuasive argument to someone in upper management, we're talking C-level, it never hurts to have a graph that goes up like this, especially if you can put a money sign on it, like a dollar or a euro sign. That's a big win. Stonks. Then you're speaking their language. Side projects makes your CV look great. I think for me as a hiring manager on various engineering teams, I always ask if there's a side project because it lets me know a candidate is sort of has initiative and is curious, and it helps me answer that question. What does this person do when no one is telling them what to do or no one is asking them what to do? Where, it really helps you find out where their heart is. It's a good measuring stick for growth. Sometimes I look at my old code and I'm like, man, this sucks, or this could be so much better. And it's motivating. You're like, wow, I've grown so much in the last few years. And last, so I don't have any huge causes that I'm sort of going to broadcast right now, but I can say that this project for me was a chance to sort of stand up for what I believe in. So I wanted to create a place on the internet that looked like what I wish the internet was more like, a little more democratized, a little more fair. So there's this application is for everyone. There's no sign up required. It's free, no ads. The source is on GitHub if anyone wants to look at it, and it's simple. It's not overwhelming or has feature bloat, no bullshit. Another choice that I very deliberately made was to not use AWS in any part of the background services. So when it came time to pick a cloud computing service to host the database, I went with Microsoft Azure. So you can still pick which billionaire you want to give your money to, which is, I think, a good thing. And there has been some nice reception from the small but dedicated synth community. Here's some screen caps from things like Reddit and Facebook. And I read this in my darkest moments to feel better about myself. All right, last section. We're going a few minutes over time, and I apologize, but a big question that I get when I show this project to people, especially people who aren't familiar with synthesizers, is, does it make sound? I see a synthesizer on the screen. I can interact with it. I'm not hearing anything. And the answer is no. It's just a tool to accompany a physical synthesizer. Or at least the answer was no. So in an effort to sort of address this question and not waste this curiosity that people have, and in a further effort to help make synthesizers more accessible to people who can't afford them or don't have a music store near them at all, where they can try one out, I spent a few weeks during the pandemic writing an emulator of this machine. So it has everything you'd expect from the actual machine, and the behavior is very, very, very close. It's not feature complete, but it will definitely give you an idea of what you can do with synthesis, and there's literally no barrier. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go on a big jam session right now, but please do check this out if you get the time, maybe on your lunch break. It's a lot of fun, and if you get hooked on synthesizers, that would make my day. All right. If you're anything like me, you love a good summary or like a 30-second elevator pitch version of things. So this slide is for you. Screen cap it if you want. I'm not going to go through it all again because this is just everything I just said. And that's the end of my slides. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. If anyone has any questions, I guess now is the time to ask. I am at your service.